Invite her? Are you serious? The cafeteria buzzed with laughter as Blake leaned back in his chair, smirking like he always did when he was the center of attention. Blake wasn't just any student. He was the golden boy of Ridgewood High, captain of the basketball team, effortlessly charming, and born into wealth. He was the guy everyone wanted to be, or be with. His friends followed him like shadows, feeding off his confidence. With prom just around the corner, the entire school buzzed with speculation. Who would Blake take? The cheer captain? The influencer with thousands of followers? The prettiest girl in school? Everyone wanted the answer, and Blake loved the attention. That's when the idea struck one of his friends, a cruel, thoughtless dare. Why not ask Naomi? The laughter that followed was louder than the cafeteria chatter. Heads turned. A few students snickered, others whispered. The name alone was enough to spark mockery. Naomi. She was the quiet girl who sat at the back of every classroom, her face often hidden behind her glasses or buried in books. Her sweaters hung loosely on her thin frame, and her messy bun looked like she tied it without caring. She rarely spoke unless called upon, and when she did, her voice was soft, so soft it often went unheard. To the students of Ridgewood, Naomi wasn't prom material. She wasn't the type of girl they imagined walking into the ballroom under glittering chandeliers. She was the type they ignored, or worse, laughed at. Blake's smirk widened. He thrived on moments like this. Pulling out his phone, he waved it around so everyone could see. All right, watch this. His fingers tapped quickly across the screen, and within seconds, the message was sent. Naomi, will you go to prom with me? The table erupted in laughter. Some nearly choked on their food. A couple of students from nearby tables leaned closer, curious to see what would happen. No one thought Naomi would say yes. She was too shy, too withdrawn. Maybe she'd ignore him. Maybe she'd be too embarrassed to reply. But then, ping, Blake's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, still smirking, expecting silence or rejection. Instead, 3 little letters stared back at him. Yes. The laughter died instantly. The air shifted. For the first time in a long time, Blake's friends didn't know what to say. Their mocking grins faltered, replaced by awkward coughs and wide eyes. Blake shrugged it off, forcing a chuckle. Guess I'm taking her then. This'll be fun. But deep inside, something unsettled him. Naomi had answered too quickly, too confidently. To him, it was still a joke, a game to keep his popularity soaring. But to Naomi, that single yes wasn't a punchline. It was the beginning of something no one at Ridgewood High, especially Blake, was prepared for. By the next morning, the news had spread like wildfire. In a school where gossip traveled faster than homework deadlines, everyone already knew. Blake had invited Naomi to prom. Whispers trailed Naomi like a shadow. Did you hear? Her? With Blake. One girl hissed to her friend near the lockers. She's gonna make a fool of herself? Another replied with a cruel smirk. Laughter echoed every time she passed by, not loud enough to be outright bullying, but sharp enough to cut. Even the teachers gave her curious looks, their raised eyebrows saying what no one dared. Is this real? Naomi walked through the hallways with her books clutched tightly to her chest. She had always been good at blending in, at becoming invisible. For years, it was her shield. Being ignored hurt less than being mocked. But this time was different. Every step she took seemed to draw eyes. Every whisper felt heavier than the one before. She heard it all. She always did. People thought quietness meant weakness, but Naomi had learned something in her silence. How to listen. She caught every sneer, every chuckle, every "she's not even pretty." It stung, but it also fueled something inside her. A fire she had kept hidden. At lunch, she sat alone as usual, but now the tables around her buzzed with cruel predictions. She probably won't even show up. Imagine her in a prom dress. She'll look ridiculous. She's gonna embarrass Blake so bad. Naomi lowered her gaze, pretending not to care. But deep inside, her resolve hardened. What no one knew was that Naomi had been waiting for this kind of moment. Not for popularity, not for revenge, but for a chance to stop hiding. That evening, after school, Naomi sat quietly at her desk at home, staring into her mirror. She pushed her glasses higher on her nose and studied her reflection. The oversized sweater, the tired bun, the invisible girl everyone thought they knew. It wasn't all of her. Behind the layers of self-protection was someone stronger, someone she had kept locked away. Her mother knocked softly before entering, carrying a large, carefully wrapped box. She placed it gently on Naomi's bed. "What's this?" Naomi asked, curiosity flickering. Her mother smiled knowingly. "Something I've been saving. Something you'll need now." Naomi opened the box, and her breath caught. Inside lay a dress, silky, elegant, shimmering with a quiet glow. It wasn't loud or flashy. It was timeless. A gown passed down through generations of women in her family. Naomi's mother touched her daughter's shoulder gently. "You've hidden long enough. It's time they saw who you really are." Naomi's eyes welled with tears. She had never thought of herself as beautiful, never believed she could step into a room and be noticed for anything other than being different. But now, staring at the gown, she felt a shift. Prom wasn't going to be a joke. Not for her. She wasn't going to the dance as the quiet, overlooked girl in the corner. She was going as herself, finally. Prom night had arrived, and the Ridgewood Hotel ballroom shimmered like something out of a fairy tale. Chandeliers cast golden light across the polished floors, and the air smelled faintly of roses and expensive perfume. Laughter and music filled the space as students arrived in glittering gowns and sharp tuxedos, each one eager to show off their best look. For most, this was the night they had dreamed of. For Blake, it was the stage he had always owned. He entered with his crew, grinning as the crowd parted for him. The boys slapped him on the back. Girls whispered his name as he walked past. Blake had built his reputation on moments like this, being untouchable, untouchably cool. Tonight was supposed to be no different. Except for one thing, the joke. "Bet she's not even gonna show," one of his friends snickered, sipping his soda. "Yeah, she probably got too scared," another chimed in. Blake smirked, raising his glass like he'd already won. "Guess she chickened out," he said, loud enough for the people nearby to hear. The crowd laughed, reassured that Naomi, the quiet, awkward girl, wouldn't dare step foot into such a glamorous scene. But then, the ballroom doors opened. At first, no one paid attention. Just another arrival, right? But then silence fell like a wave rippling through the room. Heads turned, conversations froze, even the DJ faltered mid-beat. Naomi stepped inside, and she was unrecognizable. The gown her mother had given her flowed like liquid silver, catching the light with every step. Her hair, once tied back carelessly, now framed her face in soft waves. Her glasses were gone, replaced by eyes that gleamed with confidence. The jewelry she wore sparkled like it had been made for her. She didn't just look beautiful, she looked radiant. She didn't slouch. She didn't shrink back. She walked with the poise of someone who knew she belonged there, every step measured, every glance commanding. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Phones shot into the air, flashes going off as if she were a celebrity arriving at a red carpet event. Girls who had mocked her whispered in disbelief. Boys who had ignored her couldn't take their eyes off her. Blake's smirk vanished. His drink trembled in his hand, nearly spilling. For the first time all night, he wasn't the one holding the room's attention. Naomi's eyes found his across the ballroom. She didn't smile. She didn't blush. She simply looked at him, steady, unshaken, powerful. In that moment, Blake felt something he had never felt before, small. Naomi took a breath and walked forward, each step echoing like thunder in the silence. The girl he and his friends had laughed at no longer existed. She wasn't the invisible girl in oversized sweaters. She was something else entirely. She was a goddess who had just owned the room. And suddenly, Blake realized, this night was no longer his show. "Is that Naomi?" The whispers spread like wildfire across the ballroom, overlapping in disbelief. Students craned their necks, phones recording every second of her entrance. Some rubbed their eyes as if they couldn't trust what they were seeing. "She looks like a movie star." "No way that's her. I didn't even recognize her." Girls who had mocked her for years now stared with narrowed eyes, green with envy. Boys who had never noticed her before whispered to one another, fighting the urge to approach. The entire dynamic of the room had shifted, and at the very center of it was Naomi, calm, graceful, and completely in control. She didn't rush. She didn't falter. She moved like the ballroom belonged to her. Blake, however, felt the weight of every eye turn on him. His friends gave nervous chuckles, trying to lighten the tension. "Well, you got what you asked for, man," one of them nudged. She showed up. "Yeah, looking different," another muttered. Blake's throat tightened. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Naomi wasn't supposed to show up. She wasn't supposed to look like this. And most importantly, she wasn't supposed to make him look like the fool. Naomi walked straight toward him, the crowd parting naturally around her. Every step seemed to echo louder than the music still playing in the background. When she finally stopped in front of him, Blake almost forgot to breathe. "Hi, Blake," Naomi said softly. But though her tone was gentle, her voice carried strength that silenced the last of the whispers. She wasn't timid. She wasn't apologetic. She was commanding. "Shall we dance?" Blake hesitated. A bead of sweat formed at his temple. The laughter, the prank, the joke, it all seemed ridiculous now. The entire school was watching, waiting for his reaction. Slowly, he extended his hand. Naomi took it without hesitation. The crowd gasped as they stepped onto the dance floor. The DJ, regaining his composure, shifted into a slow, elegant track. Couples made way, creating a circle around them. All eyes were locked on Naomi and Blake. At first, Blake tried to lead. He was the athlete, the confident one. Of course he should take charge. But within seconds, it was clear Naomi wasn't following. She was guiding. Her movements were effortless, her confidence radiating with every graceful step. Blake stumbled slightly, struggling to keep up. The murmurs began again. "She's leading him. Look at her. She's owning this." Blake leaned in, his voice barely above a whisper. "Naomi, I didn't know." Naomi's eyes met his sharply. Her words cut like glass. "That's because you never cared to look." The sting of her voice hit him harder than any punch. For the first time in his charmed high school career, Blake wasn't the star. Naomi was. The girl he invited as a joke had flipped the script in front of the entire school. And everyone knew it. The joke was never on Naomi. It was on him. By the time the last song of the night echoed across the ballroom, one truth was undeniable. Naomi was no longer invisible. She was unforgettable. The girl who once slipped silently through the hallways now stood at the center of everything, her presence commanding respect without her ever asking for it. People who had mocked her were now watching with admiration. Even the teachers, usually detached from prom drama, whispered to each other about her transformation. When the moment for prom king and queen arrived, the air buzzed with anticipation. Everyone expected the usual outcome: Blake and one of the popular cheerleaders. It had always been a predictable popularity contest. But this time, the energy felt different. The principal stepped up to the microphone, holding the envelope. "And now, the moment you've all been waiting for, the announcement of your prom queen." The ballroom hushed. Blake stood near the stage, smirking weakly, trying to convince himself his name would still carry the night. His friends gave him reassuring pats on the back. The principal opened the envelope, paused, and smiled. "Naomi Parker." The room erupted. Cheers. Applause. Shouts of excitement. Even some of the girls who once sneered at her now clapped, stunned by the undeniable truth of her victory. Students stood on chairs, phones flashing as they captured history being made. Naomi blinked in shock. For a moment, she froze. The girl who had spent years hiding, who had trained herself to be small and unnoticed, couldn't believe what she was hearing. But then the cheers grew louder, and she felt her mother's words echo in her heart. "It's time they saw who you really are." She walked toward the stage with her head held high. Every step felt like reclaiming the years of silence. Every clap like the world apologizing for ever doubting her. The crown was placed gently on her head, and for the first time in her life, Naomi wasn't overlooked. She was celebrated. As she turned to face the crowd, she wasn't smiling arrogantly. She wasn't gloating. Her expression was calm, graceful, like a queen who knew her worth and didn't need anyone else's validation to prove it. In the crowd, Blake clapped slowly, his chest heavy. The night had slipped from his control, but strangely, he couldn't be angry. Watching Naomi shine made him realize the truth. She hadn't changed overnight. She had always been this girl. He just never cared to see it. Naomi wasn't crowned prom queen because of popularity or wealth. She was crowned because she revealed something everyone secretly longed for: confidence, courage, authenticity. She reminded them that true beauty wasn't about fitting in. It was about standing tall when the world wanted you small. That night, Naomi didn't just enter a ballroom. She transformed it. And as she stood beneath the glowing chandeliers, the crown on her head shimmering in the light, she proved a lesson Ridgewood High would never forget. Sometimes, the girl you laugh at becomes the goddess who leaves the whole world in awe.